Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final lesson of the semester. In this lesson, I'm going to be teaching you some best practices to keep in mind when you're creating your final project multi-page website. So let's go ahead and get started. So as you can see here, what I have open is the code editor. And I have a sample multi-page website, and I want to show you a few details so you can keep these in mind as you're working on your project. So one of the things you want to keep in mind is that when you have a multi-page website, one web page is always going to be named index.html, as you see here on the left. This is something that you're used to already. You've been doing this pretty much all semester. Now, when it comes to the other pages in your website, what you're going to keep in mind is that you want to make sure to give them names that are appropriate and to help you keep them organized, right? So in this example, I've created a sample website about food. My main web page is named index.html, but then you can also see I've created additional pages. One is called desserts.html, and one is called appetizers.html, right? So as you can probably guess from the names of those files, that's the kind of content that's going to be on each of those pages respectively, okay? So when you're creating your project, one of the first things you want to do is you want to go ahead and create all the files in your project. You want to refer to the plan that you created in the first part of this assignment last week, so you can use that as a guide. And if you'll notice here, when I click on the files here in the code editor, you notice that they're blank. I just went ahead and created the files, but I haven't added anything to them yet because I haven't decided the content that's going to go on them yet. And I've also gone ahead and created a style sheet. So keeping that in mind, the main page is always going to be named index.html, and I've added some content to the HTML site. So in this assignment, one of the things that you have to do is that you have to make sure that it includes navigation. And I'm going to show you what this looks like. Again, this is going to be a very simple, even plain and ugly looking web page. But as you can see here, I've created a web page that has a very simple navigation at the top, and then it displays the content underneath, right? And if you click on any of the links that are posted here, you'll notice that all it will show is a blank page, right? And that's expected because, as I showed you earlier, those HTML files don't have anything in them. Okay, so now going back to the code editor, we know that those files are empty, right? When we have a multi-page website, whatever styling that we give to it using the styles sheet is something that we want to make sure is applied to each of the pages in our web page, right? And so since we already know how to apply style by using an external style sheet, the simplest way to make sure that all of your pages have the same style sheet is to reference it in the same exact way, right? So one of the things I always do when I'm creating websites like this is I make sure that I just simply copy and paste the link to the style sheet. All right, so you want to make sure that all of your pages have the head section and have a link to the style sheet. You also want to make sure that all of your pages have a title, right? So even though the main web page has a title, the title for each of the additional web pages in my website will have a different title, right? So you want to make sure that even though you're copying the tag that creates the title, once you paste it into that file, right? So for example, if I copy this and go to the desserts HTML, if I were to copy this into some existing HTML, I want to make sure that I'm editing this. I'm changing this to make sure that it matches something that makes sense for the content that's going to be on this page. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're creating your additional pages, that you want to make sure that all of them are linked to the same resources and display information in the same way so that it's consistent, all right? And remember that these are things that you're going to be graded on. So if one of your pages is not linked to the style sheet, you're going to lose points, right? And also your website just isn't going to look right. So make sure that when you do publish all of your files to your GitHub pages, that you actually look at your website and click on each of the links, right? You want to make sure that once you have it published, hopefully it'll look much better than what I have here. But when you do publish it, make sure you click on your navigation links and that each page looks and acts the way that it should. All right. Another thing that you want to keep in mind as you're developing your project is the navigation. All right. So each page needs to have navigation so that someone can go back to the page they were at before. Okay. So in this case, and actually I'm going to update it in this example so you can understand what I mean. So we have navigation here on the home page, right? So if I wanted to copy this, let's say I'm just going to copy all this code. Let's do a Control Alt and copy, and I'm going to go to the desserts page, and I'm just going to replace what I have there and paste here. All right. I can call this the desserts page by updating the title, right? But now, and I've copied the existing navigation here. But if I'm on the desserts page and I want to go back to the home page, how would I do that if I don't have a link to the navigation, right? So I want to make sure that I update this navigation to have a link to the home page. And so how do we do that? Well, we can insert one more navigation link and we can update it to make sure that it references the correct page. So in this instance, your home page is always going to be referenced by your index HTML file, right? And you can change the link text to say home page. All right, so we're going to save that. Now let's see what happens when we go ahead and refresh the screen here. So when we do that, right, this is the home page that's been refreshed. Now if I click on desserts, we see now that desserts has navigation that also includes a link back to the home page as well as content. And if I click on home page, it'll take me back to the home page, right? So as I continue to edit my files, for example, if I'm going to be editing the file for the appetizers page, I want to make sure that I copy all that code in there and make the necessary updates. Okay? So if you're deciding to have different content look different on different pages, well, you want to make sure that you include all of those styles here. But remember that this style sheet will be applied to all of the pages in your website, your main web page, and any additional pages for the website. Okay, so keep those things in mind. You're going to continue to use the practices you've already learned about applying styles externally, accessibility, code validation, all of those things. You'll see about that in the assignment requirements as well as the rubric. But as far as working on your project, these are the best practices you want to use to ensure that your website has a uniform look, to ensure that you don't miss any steps when developing each of the pages, and to ensure that it works correctly. Meaning that when you finally publish it, take the time to click the links on the published website and make sure that it works. Okay, so I hope that this was useful to you. Good luck on your final project, and I can't wait to see what you create.